Awesome. We got a ton of people joining. Hey, everybody. We are going to get going in just one moment. So I think as everybody piles in, I'm going to go through a couple of housekeeping items and then get going with the meat of the content. So first and foremost, this recording is going to be sent out to everybody who registered after the webinar. If you have any questions, and we absolutely encourage you to ask them, go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar. Questions asked in the chat probably won't be answered. We will be answering the Q&A at the end of the session. If there's a good topical question that comes up mid-conversation, we may answer those on the fly. So that is everything we needed to cover. So again, please don't ask your question in chat. It's probably going to go by unnoticed. Keep it in the Q&A panel. So as people start to pile in, I wanted to start with a little bit of an icebreaker. I'll ask the question, and then since I'm talking, I will go first. The question is for everybody on the panel, what was the last thing that you did for the first time? And then we'll get into introductions, then we'll get going. So last thing that I did for the first time was a sort of a short bungee jump with one of my sons that I was absolutely terrified to do and absolutely will never do again. It was the last thing I did for the first time and the last time for sure, 100%. But he wants to do it all the time. It was awful, terrifying. But now he wants to bungee jump and skydive and all of those kinds of terrible things. So yeah, deep breaths. All right, anybody else who wants to jump in with that one? I'm getting sweaty just thinking about it, to be honest.
I can go next. So hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I work at Hightouch. I do talent there. The last thing I did for the first time is I'm a regular concert, or I guess a festival attendee, and I always do car camping. And my biggest problem is staying hydrated enough. And, obviously it's super hot. And my biggest concern is I hate using the porta potties. So this past Coachella, I actually set up a bathroom tent and it saved my life. So if anyone ever needs advice on how to do that, hit me up.
That's awesome. And I'm envious that you're going to Coachella. Last one I went to was in 2007, which is, might as well be lifetimes ago. Gerardo, you want to jump in?
Sure. I think this story is going to seem a little bit not important compared to what Sarah was doing, but I think the last week was the first time I went to a concert on my own. I usually go to concerts with a lot of people, and this was the first time I went to a concert that nobody wanted to go with me, so I went by myself, and I had a pretty good time. I was like just laser focused on the music and nothing else, so it was a pretty good experience. I liked it.
Can I ask what concert you went to?
Oh, it's I know I don't look like it, but I like metal, like heavy metal. So I went to like a big concert. I liked it a lot. So yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. Vanessa, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I'm a mom, so my answer is not going to be as fun as either of those. But I think the last thing I did for the first time was I learned from my daughter last week the correct sound that a lion makes when we were playing. She got very upset that apparently roar is not the correct vocabulary that a lion uses. So she gave me a whole seminar on how lions should sound and everything that has to do with the lion. So it's the first time I learned so much from my daughter, who's 3.
I really want to ask follow-up questions about that, but I feel like I would distract us for about 15 minutes. So let's not. I'm gonna get completely away from that. So let's just get straight into it. Let's get into introductions. My name's Nathan. I run all of engineering at CoderPad. I started as a backend engineer, moved my way into leadership. Been building and running teams at everything from huge enterprises to small startups to somewhere in between, which is where CoderPad is for almost a decade now, which seems almost unbelievable. But that's me. I've obviously got had lots of experience with talent acquisition and making sure that that relationship is very successful. So couldn't be happier to be here and talk about that. Sarah, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, of course. So again, Sarah, I'm based in Honolulu, actually moving at the end of the week. My husband is in the military, so it's a frequent thing for us. I've been in talent acquisition now for about 6 years. I say that I've been on every side of the talent acquisition tech stack. So I've done coordinating, sourcing, and now I just do full cycle recruiting. But I mostly focus on hiring engineering for engineering at Hightouch. So that's kind of my niche and my specialty.
Awesome. Gerardo?
Great, thanks. So my name is Gerardo. I'm based out of El Salvador. I'm a project manager for TELUS International, specifically in the talent acquisition. Just as Sarah, I've also been through the whole recruitment stack. I started out as like in sourcing and talent attraction. I went to tech recruiting, and now I'm in project management. I'm part of like a little team called the Global Innovation Center. And basically what we do is we push innovation for talent acquisition around the world, right? We push new tools, process improvement, new methodologies, and everything we basically can help our talent acquisitions teams on.
Awesome. Vanessa?
So my name is Vanessa. Everyone calls me Vane. I'm an account general manager here at TELUS International. That's essentially like a very fancy way of saying that I have a bunch of developers, project managers, content creators, and QAs, and a bunch of other type of professions that are under me, and they work on what the pages are for TELUS and for other clients. My background is a little different from everyone that's in kind of like the IT, because I'm an industrial engineer. So I started out in manufacturing, a lot of physical things with plants and working with actual like creating objects. And now I'm in this world where everything's just abstract and you can't actually see it. It's all on your computer. So really interesting and really excited for the chat we're going to have today.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for introducing yourself. So let's just get straight into it. I thought this would be a good way to start the conversation. I wanted to start with maybe and go around the room and share some sort of horror stories of the worst misalignment you've seen between talent acquisition, recruiting, and or the engineering. I could absolutely start, but I've started all of these. So anybody who wants to jump in, go for it. With some of your horror stories, and then we can just go around the room and share.
I can start if you guys want. So I think I don't like to call them like horror stories. I like learning pieces for us at talent acquisition, right? But I'm sure we all have a lot of them. I can remember one specific where they were asking us for this, which now it's like a commonplace technology, which was called Jasper reports. And I'm not too technical, I'm sorry, but I know it's something like on the Java reporting side of things. And it was the first time we got asked for it. And it was just quite a journey to look for a candidate with that. We had a lot of meetings with the technical team. I even started Googling what's Jasper reports and everything else. I remember I contacted someone from NetBeans, if I'm not mistaken, because they have like a partnership with them. And I started finding so much about it. It was quite a complicated profile. And nowadays it's like a commonplace technology. So I feel very lucky I got to learn about it, but it was definitely a very interesting profile.
Yeah, I mean, those are profile mismatches, especially with new technologies as they come up, is extremely challenging for TA professionals, right? It's because you have people that are technical, who know this stuff like a back of their hand all the time, and they're like, hey, here's this new thing that you know absolutely nothing about and that is brand new. Can you find us somebody who could be who's proficient in it? It's a nightmare. Since I'm talking, I'll give y'all one. I think the biggest misalignment I've personally ever had in my career is a critical hire that we were trying to make that was time sensitive, and basically, I know every single hire you make is time sensitive, but this one was really, it was for a key role in the organization. and it kept getting deprioritized, and we couldn't figure out why. And it was, long story short, it was because of organizational misalignment way above us. And so it took us 6 months to fill a role that should have, maybe taken 2, which was very frustrating for everybody involved, and just because people weren't talking enough. So that is probably my worst example. That was early in my management career as well. So not too great. Sarah or Vanessa?
Yeah, I mean, to the last point in the chat, I think we all have horror stories, like a toolbox. I think even like a storage shed of horror stories is how I would describe some of the experiences I've had in the past. But as I think about, the worst misalignments I've seen, I think they have to do with prioritization and lack of prioritization between the teams. I think we can all agree that interviews are really the heart of how we hire. And all of my horror stories have to do with hiring managers, engineers, engineering managers, whoever it is, missing interviews, because I think nothing is more detrimental for us as talent teams, engineering teams, and for our candidates than when people miss interviews. And you're scrambling to figure out where that person is and trying to, obviously apologize to candidates. So I probably have hundreds of stories of people who've missed them, but I won't go into detail. But I think that it feels the worst for me personally when I experience that.
And it's hard because it's really disrespectful to the candidate experience, right? And all of the things that they're going through, because nobody just interviews for one role when they're looking, right? And it's a time sink out of their day, and just to roll with that a little bit. Like, I've seen definitely on the technical side maybe a lack of respect for people's time, and I don't know if that's a personality trait that we all have or something like that, but especially on the candidate side, right? And it's just not it's very difficult to solve for. Let's put it that way. I'm sure you all have millions of stories of this, and it's endlessly frustrating on my end when I see it. So, Vanessa, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a mesh between what Sarah is talking about and Gerardo. Sometimes, and I feel like every role that I'm interviewing for, we're looking for like a unicorn candidate, that they're the best in everything. But when I look at the actual project, it's really 2 out of those 5 things that they need, and actually know the other 3. So maybe you've had experience but you don't have to be the best in that. So I think a lot of the times when we're doing interviews, sometimes the process elongates because we're looking for a unicorn, and then it happens to be, no, that's not the actual skill set we're looking for. So we have to add another interview into the process and add another interview into the process. And it's something that from our side, we could have made a little more efficient if we would have just reviewed correctly what the candidate needed, because at the end of the day, those unicorns do exist, but it just makes the whole entire process more difficult.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just to riff on that a little bit, because I have a very, very, very strong opinion on that, and how that sort of sabotages the entire process, all the way from a final interview, from all the way from sourcing. How have you, and I would even say those unicorns don't actually exist, right? There may be 1 or 2 in the world of those types of profile. Like, Vanessa, how have you steered people away from this who are insistent that, like, no, I need all of these attributes, they're all non-negotiable, I need somebody with 85 years of experience in a framework that has existed for 10, right? Or whatever the case may be, right? Like, how have you steered people away from this and sort of coached people that, like, look, maybe you don't need all these things, maybe.
And I think really the approach I take isn't really to steer them away, but to understand better what the need is. So one of the things that I really like about TI is we have a great partnership between recruiting and kind of the engineering side. So we've started having these kind of finding sessions. So once I know that my team, or there's a project that's onboarding, I'll make sure that someone from the recruiting team will be involved in those conversations, so we can both understand exactly what the project needs are. So it helps also strengthen the relationship I have, but at the same time, we have 2 points of view of, okay, what are the actual needs? And I'll go back and let them know exactly what we're looking for. So it all starts from like what the actual job description is and really like nailing it down to what are the actual needs, and then everything else can be nice to haves.
Got it. Sometimes the job description is even not right? And sometimes, I don't know, I found in joint sessions with talent acquisition, I have, in discussing, what I wrote up as a job description, I realized like, oh wait, maybe I don't need this, or I don't need this, or I should be looking at this differently. So I don't know. I've always found those types of conversations to be both helpful for sourcing, right, and getting a candidate profile that you actually want to chase that is realistic, and then also narrowing down what are the actual things you have to have that are non-negotiables. Cool, that's a really good one. Anybody else have any thoughts on non-negotiables in job descriptions or for sourcing? I could go on about this for probably this entire session, but I'm curious to hear where everybody else's head is on that.
I definitely have some thoughts. I think I've worked, now doing recruiting on the technical side at 3 different companies. I think the experience has been completely different at all of them, which I'm sure everyone can relate to. I think the first 2 companies focused heavily on specific technologies. Like, this person has to have worked with REST APIs or JavaScript, which almost makes sourcing easier because you're looking for specific words. Where I am currently with Hightouch, we are really looking for smart people. We're looking for people who've had great career progression, who've, maybe, gotten promotions very quickly, maybe who are just smart. And so the difference in what I've been looking for has helped me evaluate profiles in a very different way. And I think it just creates a whole different way of trying to assess people that's different than looking for Rust or whatever it is. We're not looking at years of experience. We're looking on people's profiles and in phone calls for communication and some of these other soft skills. So I definitely prefer that method. It's easier than having to look for those technologies, but it's just kind of a different way of evaluating candidates.
Yeah, it's a great point. Gerardo, you have any thoughts on that before I dominate the rest of this conversation? Because I'm happy to.
No, definitely have some thoughts. I think adding to what Sarah said, it's like,
It's Sarah.
and Brandon said, like, we're all looking, Sarah, I'm sorry. We're all looking for the unicorns, right? We're all looking for these great profiles, but the job description is going to rule, right? The postings, it's going to rule the sourcing. It's going to look the first impression when somebody goes into whatever job board you're using, whatever career set you have, and they look at the description and they see, okay, this is what they're looking for. So taking a look at the job description, making sure you have your non-negotiables as required, your negotiables as desired, it makes a huge difference, right? It's different saying, I need somebody with 5 years experience on this specifically, and this is a must. We're saying, all right, you can have 2 years required and desirable 3 years. It makes a huge impact on when somebody's applying and saying, hey, I can actually be a good fit for this job. I want to do it. So I think that's a big thing from my side. And I know our team does an amazing job at it, like auditing the job descriptions and making sure that whatever's posted is getting out that correct information out.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective on the technical end, I think my opinion over the years has shifted dramatically with experience. I think most technical jobs that you're hiring for, the most important thing is problem solving skills and how they can work with the existing team. And the rest of it is mostly negotiable, right? Including technologies, including tech stack. Obviously, you want somebody who's going to be able to be somewhat fluent in the tech stack that the team or the company has. But they, in my mind, don't dominate what makes a successful candidate. It's really around problem solving and working with the team. I don't know. That's my own bias on that personally. You hire good people, you find people who can solve problems with your existing team. You've solved 90% of your problem. Anyway, all right, moving on to sort of a different subject, and this is broad, so I imagine this could go in any direction. What really does a successful relationship between TA and engineering look like? And open this up for really any interpretation of that question. This could be, you've got good process defined, you've got good roles and responsibilities defined. Really, I'd love to open this up for anybody to jump in and really describe either what you're doing today that's successful, or what you've done in the past that's successful, and what that process looks like.
I'm happy to go first. Just about what makes the relationship successful on both sides. I think it's taken me time personally to learn. And I think I'd like to start with, I think I saw a question in the Q&A just about how to become knowledgeable. I think that that's the first area through which talent and engineering teams or technical teams can build trust. I think it's important to think of yourself as a part of the org that you hire for. And to that end, I think as much learning that can happen is going to be super useful for you for forever. So what I've done in all the orgs I've jumped in is try to understand the technologies they work with, maybe take classes on it. Maybe I'm not understanding it. Like I definitely can't code, but it makes those conversations with engineers, both internally and externally, so much easier. I think being a part of the team and feeling like you're a part of the team is important. So shadowing stand-ups, shadowing planning meetings, even if you have no idea what people are talking about, can really help you learn how these teams are thinking and how they communicate, which makes those calls so much easier. Being a part of Slack channels, going to events with those teams, really feeling like you're ingrained in that team is, I think, the most important step or first step, which creates kind of that successful relationship. And then I think personally, the second pillar is making sure that there's buy-in on both sides, that recruiting is going to help the business. And we're not just like annoying people who are asking you for tons of time and sending you things to do, sending you interviews to take that you don't want to take. Like we are really thinking through this thoughtfully because we've invested time into learning what you all do day to day. So knowing that there's a commitment on both sides is really helpful. I think sometimes thinking as recruiting as kind of sales is a little more helpful because I think sales is, sometimes I have felt in my career that sales is so respected, sales has so much knowledge. And what I've really learned is like, they actually do have a lot of knowledge. They've spent a lot of times with kind of the softwares that they're using and all that stuff. So I think knowing on both sides that there's a time commitment and that we're doing the best we can, they're doing the best we can. We're really thinking through things thoughtfully because we know what they need. We've spent time with them. I think that creates like really good trust on both sides.
I think recruiting as sales is such an interesting idea that maybe I haven't thought about it exactly that way before, but you're 100% right. The sort of the whoever is responsible for placing, or filling a role on the recruiting side and the hiring manager are really partners in that sale, if you want to think about it that way, right? Like, I don't know, part of, sometimes the hardest part, and there's something in the chat about this, the hardest part of landing really great candidates is really being great at the pitch for the company and the team. And I really don't think that's talked about enough. And I think that's a really, really interesting point. So I love that. I just wanted to underline that, put that in bold, and just put that in everybody's head, because that couldn't be more close to the truth. I think a candidate experience that is, where the recruiting partners and the hiring manager and the entire panel of interviewers are really, yes, they're trying to assess the skills of the candidate and assess the fit, but also really trying to actively sell the experience in the company and the team, versus one that is very much like, look, I've been in these interviews before at every progression of my career. That's like, well, you should be thankful we're even giving you an interview, right? Is a dramatically different experience, and I don't think that's talked about enough personally. So anyway, thank you for that. That was awesome. I'll move on from that because maybe you can tell I could spend a long time talking about that because I feel passionately about it. But Gerardo, Vanessa, do you guys have anything to add on the on the process side? Like what really makes a good successful talent acquisition and engineering relationship?
I think Zara, like, she hit on something that's really important, which is the trust part. At the end of the day, like, in anything that you're working on in your company, you always assume that you're the only one that cares about what you care about, and like metrics don't align. And it's even more true when it turns into hiring versus needing someone on the team. And it's taking away that assumption of, oh, they're just trying to put whoever on the team to meet their metrics because they need me to hire someone. But having what really helps, at least me specifically, is having recruiting and hiring be involved from the get-go. And that way they understand what the need is, they understand everything, and that trust is built, that I feel that they also understand the priority of it. So I can't even explain how many ways you can build that trust, but I think that's the most important takeaway we can have from this conversation.
Yeah, totally. Gerardo, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think just adding on what everyone else said, it's really all about, I know it's a cliche, but communication and getting to know the person like behind the interview. That's what really helps, right? Because you may say, okay, we're looking for a PM and this guy's going to interview it. It's different than saying, oh, Vanessa's going to interview this guy. What do you know about Vanessa? Okay, Vanessa's looking for this and this, she likes this. And also, I see a comment in the chat saying that our commodity is adult professionals. And in the end, it's true. Like when you are sending somebody to an interview, you also have to prepare them and telling them, hey, Vanessa's going to be in your interview. She's great. So she's in the PMI, she's in AGM, she went to this university. If you have any conversation with them, you can lead it this way. And it brings like a human part to like a very technical process. So I think knowing your engineering team really helps. That's a game changer. Knowing who they are, knowing the do's and don'ts for them, it can really help drive an interview and prepare a candidate for them.
That's awesome. It's great insight. I think we could go further on a couple of areas, but I do want to jump into sort of wrapping this topic up. I think this has been most of the misalignment that I've personally had between TA and technical groups is really around defining what success looks like outside of just, yes, put a body into this seat in my team, right? Which is the least nuanced definition of success you could have here. Like, what do y'all think about defining success in both, individual roles that you're looking for a hiring manager, and then sort of relationship with talent acquisition engineering? I'll since I haven't volunteered to go first in a little bit, I will. I think the thing that is most important about defining success for me is, and this is especially true at bigger companies, making sure that the organizations, because you're in different organizations, right? At smaller companies, you may be collapsed and a little bit closer. In bigger organizations, you really align on what are the outcomes that we're looking for here, right? Misalignment I've seen in the past has been like, well, talent acquisition leaders are looking for metrics around candidate placement, right? So they're optimizing. So you get, sometimes less skilled candidates through, and then engineering may be optimizing for, to use some examples that have been come up on this call, like placing a unicorn, right? So those are two things that couldn't be more, unaligned to begin with. So I think really just getting, hiring manager and whoever is running the talent acquisition for this particular role aligned on joint goals. I think that's the way I like to kick off pretty much every single one of the placements for everybody on my team. Because if you don't start there, it gets, everything else just gets harder. So that's mine. Anybody else want to jump in? Sort of talk about what success looks like for you?
If that's okay, I'll start. For me, success is not just like having the right candidate, but having a candidate that I know will be able to grow and is going to stay in the company. So I think some of the misalignments, and I guess some of our assumptions sometimes is like what you said, like, oh, they got a body through the door and there's someone on the team. And then from engineering side, what we're thinking is this person going to stay for 3 months? Is this person going to be successful? And if that doesn't happen, well, it damages that trust that was built. So I think for me, success is something that is measured 6 months after the fact that someone was hired. were they the correct person? Was it someone that meshed well with the culture? Is it someone that's contributing? And if yes, what did we do in that process correctly to make sure that we can just replicate it for the next time?
That's awesome. We've got a amazing person who runs TA internally for us, and as you were saying that, I just realized for all of our new hires, she does like monthly check-ins as you know, after the hires, like 1 month check-in, 3 month check-in, 6 months check-in, and she does a great retrospective on all of that. And it's, I mean, she's amazing. Sejal, if you're listening to this, yes, I'm talking about you. She's incredible, and like I couldn't agree with that more. I just wanted to give a shout out to some of our folks internally. Gerardo, Sarah, anything to add?
So I think like Vanna said, sometimes we assume candidate journey and the candidate experience is all up to the tools, right? This is how the process should go, and if something goes wrong, oh, the candidate was declined, that's it. But candidate experience, it's a journey that includes engineering, it includes interviewers, it includes what happens after the interviews and everything else. So having a holistic view of that and having like a good real look at, you're actually trying to help a person, right? It's a person that's behind that process. So measuring success is giving them like a good experience. And like Bana said, it's not just hires, right? It's not a higher percentage and that's it, that's your success. It's about what happened in the process. Did somebody get declined? Okay, he got declined for this process, but what can I do in the future? Can I put it in my pipeline? Can I send like CSAT? How did I deliver the feedback? How did Bana's team help me understand why the candidate did not make it to the next part of the process? That's a real success, right? Making an impact on your talent acquisition process, on the feedback engineering is giving you, and putting that into work, right, to improve the candidate journey itself. So I think that's the most important thing for success.
How do you, I'm gonna ask a follow-up question, because I've had experiences with, I've had challenges with getting everybody to understand that. How do you get a technical team to really align around making sure the candidate experience is a joint priority for them?
So I don't want to drive the conversation away from like the people skills side of things, because the first thing I would say is like having the correct tools behind your process. But I know we're probably going to speak about that later, so I don't want to spoil it for everybody. But on the other side, it's mostly from finance team who do an amazing job providing feedback, right? It's different having somebody tell you this candidate did not move forward because of lack of experience than having them tell them, hey, he has 2 years of experience on this side of things, but he can improve on this. These are his areas of opportunity. It's a whole different kind of feedback, right? And a whole different conversation you can drive when speaking to a candidate. And it leaves a good impression on his future at the company, on our branding, on the interview process. So it's definitely connect with your engineering team, tell them this is the kind of feedback we expect. If you have like templates, if you have like a basic process, improve it and see and talk to them, see what they see in the interviews, what they can offer, how they can help to provide that feedback, because in the end, you're going to help people and you're going to help your process. But I don't know if you want to add anything else. I know your team is amazing doing feedback, so I really appreciate it.
Well, oh my God, there's so much fun load here. So I guess when it comes to feedback, I think one of the things that's really helped is, and it sounds so redundant, but like getting feedback on our feedback and actually understanding why sometimes the feedback that we give that I felt was very great and said everything it needed to say did not help recruiting at all. To understand what went well, what didn't go well, like what are we trying to, what we're trying to find. So I think one of the things that we have like those very open conversations is we actually had a bunch of conversations around feedback and how that helps the entire process. And that's helped us internally just to align to what are the expectations as hiring managers of what we should be incorporating inside that feedback.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think I've had struggles with getting technical people to provide feedback that is anything different than, oh, this person was terrible, do not hire them, or this is amazing, please, move them forward. Neither of those are helpful for the exact same reason, right? It lacks nuance, and that's, I don't know, it's been a struggle of mine. Anyway, I could go into that for a long time. Sarah, anything to add on defining success for you?
Yes, definitely. But in terms of feedback, I have tried to stop harping my teams for feedback. I actually think BrightHire has been a really helpful tool for this. I watch these interviews, especially when they're no's, and try to see where things go wrong, see if I can parse feedback up from what I'm watching, and then, obviously share it with my teams, see if that's the right kind of thing that I got from the interviews, and then share it with candidates. I believe in trying to take time off of my engineer's plate because I know that they're spread so thin. So I definitely do my best. In terms of defining success, I think every org is different. Every talent organization is going to be different. Some people's success is defined by hiring 12 people a quarter. Some people's is going to be with bringing great candidates through the door, filling the recs they have at hand. I think personally, I've always believed that quality over quantity is what defines success. If I'm putting candidates in front of my engineering teams that even if it didn't work out, they still feel they had a really great time knowing, that person contributed ideas that maybe they've never thought about. There's maybe not the right level for now or for what we're hiring for. I say that's a success. I think a personal success that I've kind of had recently with engineering hiring is my phone screens have replaced hiring manager phone screens. So for one of my roles currently, I can just send candidates straight into technical screens. So what that has taught me is like my involvement in engineering, all the learnings I've done, how deeply I understand my teams, it has proved to be successful, and I can actually save my hiring manager some time. So I'm really happy to be where I am with that.
I want to thank you for your service for replacing hiring manager screens because that's amazing. And I think that speaks for itself about the level of trust that you have with your technical teams. If they're like, yeah, I don't need a hiring manager screen because Sarah's talked to them and I trust her. And she knows she knows just as much as I do for the basics of the role or the fundamental parts of the role, and even more so than I do. So don't even need it, which is, that's ideal. Like you don't see that much, which is awesome.
One more note, because I see a question in the chat, is like, if I feel the candidate needs more selling or I didn't get the right technical information from them, I will loop the hiring manager in. Otherwise, they will generally meet the hiring manager at the on-site. We are a smaller company, so it's not really a long process. But yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Just want to remind everybody, we've got about 20 minutes left. I think we're going to try to reserve 10 for Q&A. We've got one, I think we've already answered, one unanswered. So if you do have any questions, you want to get in there, get in the Q&A section of the Zoom, throw those in there so we can get through and answer some of those. But that's awesome. One more thing that you just, Sarah, you reminded me of. How do you all deal with and help craft a reasonably staged hiring funnel, right? Like you can have a really short one, which is just some kind of a screen, technical assessment, then maybe quote unquote on-site, and then decision, or you can have something that is ridiculously grueling and 18 stages of madness, right? Like, and I'm sure you all have probably dealt with every single version of that. So I'd love to hear, and that, personally to me, it's a long interview process damages candidate experience, wastes everybody's time and everything. So how, I don't know, I'd love to get either thoughts on that in general or how you all have helped your technical teams, sort of refine the process over time. And then we can get to the next topic. Sorry, I thought that was an important one to get into.
I know we're all talking at one time. No, I'm just kidding. In terms of stages or steps and not having too many, we have kept it at a minimum or at a maximum of 3 to 4 stages. We are a small company. Our engineering team is around 20-ish people. We really don't need more people on the panels. I think in the past, mitigating this problem has involved being a little bit more aggressive on that front and saying like, hey, I'm actually not gonna send this candidate through a 8-step process. I think it's really unfair. And I won't be hiring unless we can agree on a shorter sequence for them. And you really have to bring it down to an empathetic point of view. If I was a candidate and I was proposed an 8-step process for a senior software engineering role, I would probably withdraw from the process. And I think humanizing it for hiring managers really helps, because maybe at a managerial level, maybe at a director level, 8 steps might make more sense because there's a lot of people that you do have to meet. But you got to compare it to what you would be willing to do and what other companies are doing as well.
I mean, plus 1 million to that. I have opted out of interviewing or continuing to interview with companies because of how long the process was when it was disclosed. And I've worked at places that shall remain nameless who had those level of number of interviews, and I can tell you firsthand, it completely damages both candidate experience, company reputation, and everything between. So totally aligned there. All right. Oh, go ahead, Gerardo.
I was just saying that I also agree that from the talent acquisition perspective, we can also do some things to like make the process shorter. Like, for example, I had a case where we had like a screening questionnaire which the candidate filled when they applied. Then we had like a screening with one of our team members. Then we had a recruiter interview, and then we had the hiring manager interview. And that's before the technical side of things, right? So just from our side, we were having like 4 checks, which in the end we just merged into one, right? If we have all the information based on a questionnaire, then I don't really need to check his experience. I don't really need to answer or look for those answers if I have all the information, maybe even in his CV. So also stay on the lookout for like gaps in your processes, like reprocessing, which is a big enemy of TA, right? So stay on the lookout. Maybe you're asking the same information in 2 steps of your process. There are areas of opportunity for talent acquisition always. So stay on the lookout if you see anything for that. That really helped us at TI.
Yeah, awesome. Vanessa, any thoughts before we get into some questions on tooling?
I guess with this topic, I don't know how much I can add, because from like I was trying to be funny and be like, well, if you guys do your job better, then when it comes to me, we have to do less interviews, but that didn't sound so funny in my head. But anyways, I think at the end, it's all about that partnership, and like Gerardo said, is looking for those like efficiencies inside of it, because of course, when it comes to the hiring manager, like our time we feel is precious. So we only want to talk to the people that we feel are going to be, a foot in the door. They're going to be the ones that are selected. So we give a lot of pushback about having too many interviews or, getting too many candidates that aren't approved. But if we have those conversations from the get-go, it really helps the rest of it to be able to reduce the number of touch points that there is.
It's awesome. 100% agree with everything everyone said, which is rare for me. I'm usually disagreeable in general. To get into tooling, the question I want to ask everybody here, one of the things that has made my hiring over the years so much more successful is really good tools. And I mean, I will give you all a couple of examples of tools I've used before that have helped. I think having a picture into what a funnel looks like for both hiring manager and even people who are going to be on the interviewing panels is really, really helpful to understand how things are progressing, what your rates look like at each part of the funnel. Those are really, really important. I think having tools that get you as close to on the job for live interviews. I promise I'm not saying this as a CoderPad employee today. I've used CoderPad since almost it was initiated. So having a tool like that is as close to having an IDE in the workplace that an engineer can actually show their skills in is so helpful. It's the next best thing to being in the same room with them. Having a actual laptop and pair programming with them. So having tools is really, really helpful to me, getting as close to them being on site doing the job as possible. So I could go through a couple of tools I love. actually really like Lever. Lever's really good at designing sort of top-down interview panels. There's a couple of other TA focused tools that are great. Any tools in particular that you guys like, or any things that tools do that you think really helps either in your job or your technical team's job in hiring?
Oh yeah, this is my jam. So yeah, definitely first, know your tools, right? We also use CoderPad in our organization, and we have an internal team which is called the BPE team, which you do like the reporting and analytics for our tools, and they do amazing things with CoderPad. And sometimes they give me like some insights, and it's like, how do you get this? And it's part of the, in case CoderPad's tools reporting. Like, why? So it's like the first step is know your tools, and if you have an assessment tool, get to know it, get to know the reporting and the analytics it gives you. It's going to give you valuable information so you can work with engineering. And the other side of things, know your CRM. Currently, we're using Avature as our CRM, but we also use it to gather the feedback we get from the engineering teams. So if you have time, ask your BPE team if you have somebody handling the tools, ask them for help automating like the interview process, automating how we get feedback from Bane. It's not something that's just helping me as TA, it's helping Bane. As she said, their time is very precious. So instead of asking them via a phone call for 30 minutes what happened with the candidate, if Bane can just automate this and she got a form and she's going to fill that information in a very detailed way in 5 minutes, it's going to make her life 1,000 times easier, and it's going to make my life 1,000 times easier. So yeah, so definitely get your assessment tools, know your tools, and know your analytics. It's going to help you a lot.
Yeah, and I'd add on to that. So at least from my point of view, CoderPad really helps us a lot with a lot of the like interviews and placements that I do. But it's really important to also explain to people outside of the recruiting point of what did you use inside of CoderPad to be able to evaluate someone. Because sometimes I get presented something like, I don't know, someone got 50% on SQL, but the parameters that they used was super senior. So 50% is actually someone who is very technical, but what I see is a failing grade. So I think that's one of the things that we don't value enough. It's also understanding what are we using as a parameter at the beginning, so that whatever we're sending through the funnel, like it's interpreted correctly.
I mean, this speaks to a sort of panel alignment before you ever get into hiring for the role, right? Like, I cannot tell you how many times I had, engineers who were really great, but also very critical of everybody's work. There's this one guy who I'm still a really good friend with that used to work for me. It was very binary for him. Either they got everything right and anticipated every single one of his questions, or they were terrible, right? And so that's not a particularly good signal. But yeah, just getting everybody aligned on like, what level of questions are we asking? Like, what does each phase look like? Are we all aligned on like what this looks like and how we're going to be, looking in the tools that we have or that we're using for the hiring process to determine that. So plus 1 million on that. Sarah, anything to add?
Nothing too insightful. I would say my holy grail of tools for recruiting are probably Greenhouse, Gem, and Good Time. And those are all just to make my life easier.
Automate all the stuff that is boring and terrible that we want to automate out of our lives.
Automate yourself out of a job. That's what I've always said. I'm still getting there.
Awesome. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, and we've got a good number of questions that have popped up. I know we already answered Stephen's one on the fly. So let's get through a couple of these. Let's go through one of the anonymous questions. I'm going to just bounce back and forth. Since we were talking about pushback a second ago, at what time do you push back on the feedback given by an engineering team if you disagree with it? How do you say that without ruining the relationship? Let's say when the reason put forward as declining a candidate is not satisfactory. That's a great question, and I think someone just talked about that a little bit.
Vanessa is gonna kill me.
I just put my comment in the chat. I feel like
Yeah.
this question, you should never disagree.
You're never wrong,
Right.
Manny. No, but I think from a TA perspective, what I can tell you is pretty much building on what we've just spoken about, like communication and also knowing the profile, right? Because sometimes the disposition reasons or the declination reasons are going to be very technical. And what can you do as TA, since you're not a technical, you're not a developer, you cannot say this part of the code is correct. You made a mistake. It's like use your tools, right? If you have a technical assessment tool, if you have CoderPad, get to know it. Get to know what the report tells you. Get to know what the results are giving you, so you can also actually push back on technical things. On the other side of things, like if it's salary, if it's soft skills, if it's personal things, that's where you can shine, right? That's where you can come in. And if you know the profile, you can also add to things like, for example, this specific part of the job description was not completely filled. But if you know, like, for example, and I can put one specific case that you guys are gonna like we had somebody request like something specific for Jira, which is a project management tool. And they declined the candidate because he did not have experience on this. But since we knew the profile, we as technical recruiters have knowledge on the general tools, right? We told them, this person does not have experience in Jira, but he has experience on Monday.com. So he has experience in project management tools. We'll buy him a course on Jira, but the candidate's great. And the candidate got hired. And I remember one day I was walking through the floor and he was taking a small course on Jira, but the soft skills, the main knowledge, and the cultural fit was there. So we pushed back and we fortunately got the candidate hired.
That might be the most egregious example of a decline I have ever heard. I think if they can solve technical problems, they can probably figure out how to use Jira.
It's not against money, I swear. I like money.
That's a good one. I'm gonna jump in. Daniel just asked a question that is a lot different than everybody else's and sort of speaks close to my heart. He says, hi, I'm an engineer, and during the last year, I slowly took on hiring manager responsibilities. I'm confident to gauge technical matches. However, assessing cultural fit is much harder for me. Can you recommend any strategies to help with that? I am going to give an answer first. I'm hoping my TA friends also have some advice for Daniel. First of all, let me tell you that this is the most difficult transition you will have in your entire career. Going from a individual contributor to a manager is, for me and for all of my colleagues who I've worked with throughout the years that have progressed into leadership, it is the most difficult context shift that you will ever do, I promise. So if you are still doing that today, you're getting through it, and congratulations, and keep going. It will be just fine, I promise. I would think about, what are the things that you need the engineers on your team to do that are not technical? Who do they need to interface with? What kind of people do they need to interface with? I'll give you some toy examples. Does your team deal with, I don't know, people that, like when I was at Hulu, we had people that dealt with content teams all the time. What types of relationships do they have to build? What types of things do they have to do? Are they going to have to deal with product owners all the time? What do those relationships have to look like? And then you can really assess for, like, let's just run with the product owner example. You can have an entire interview dedicated towards a product owner, really sussing out how they've worked with other product owners in the past and figuring out, like, how are this person's soft skills with respect to the soft skill part of the job that they will do, which is interfacing with me, who is not a technical person, right? So I would encourage you to think about the use cases for their job that will be not completely technical, and then just roll with that, and then work with partners in your organization who are not completely technical, and come up with a panel for them. That would be my recommendation. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the things that helped me with that jump is kind of actually get to know your team, talk to everyone on your team, talk to all the people that have been there for a while, your counterparts, and really understand the culture. Because, and now I can like push it back to Gerardo, even though sometimes you put something in the feedback that is pushed against, it's because of those things that we can't measure that someone will not mesh well inside of your organization. So you really have to understand what the organization is and what you're looking for and where you're trying to go to be able to evaluate on the culture, because it's the most difficult part. And it's also the most difficult part to talk to recruiting about, of why someone will not be a good fit.
That's perfect. Sarah, were you going to add something?
We're discussing Daniel's question, right? I think.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. I mean, I think so early on in a management career or in hiring manager life, it's okay to rely on your talent team for things like this. It's okay to really be the expert on one side. That's kind of where you find that we have a strength and you have a strength, and we can come together and like make the right decisions together. So until you feel like you have a better gauge for the cultural kind of addition assessments, you can rely on talent for that.
Plus 1 million on that. Ask for help. Gerardo, I was about to type answer on that one because I love that question. You want to read it and get into it?
Sure thing. So someone asked, what do you guys do when the engineering team does not have time to interview or review tech tests? I see Van is laughing, but this was actually a good answer. And from our experience, what we've seen is that if the engineering team is involved in the creation of the assessment, they're going to feel that much more comfortable skipping that step. So it's not all bad. If they don't want, if they don't have time to review technical test, it's not all bad. So for example, Van and his team helped us with one specific assessment. It was a Java assessment, and they helped us build it. Like we were on CoderPad, we were building the screen assessment, and now it gets to a point that we have that one assessment that we've identified super effective. It was built with them, so when we pass it and we send it to them, if they see the score, if they see like the basic insights, they know it's right because they're the ones that built it, right? So work with your engineering team, see if you can collaborate on building the assessments and the tools. It's going to save you that much time, right? Because if they don't have time to see it, but if they built it, then they know they're right. As Vanya said, they're always right. So if the candidate did good on their assessment, they're good candidates.
That's awesome. I was just going to jump in on the question about a unresponsive or a too busy hiring manager. Look, I hate to appeal to authority on anything. I think it's the wrong approach for almost everything. But if the hiring manager you're partnering with is too busy to to assist with the role that you're helping them hire for, and there's no way to get around it, like honestly, that might be the only example I will ever recommend going to their manager about, because if they can't move things forward, they're damaging the candidate experience, and I would say 100% damaging the company reputation. And that is something everybody, absolutely everybody, should be concerned about. Sorry, you're nodding your head. You have anything to add to that?
Well, I just said before, of course, I think that's probably a justifiable case to go skip level and talk about feedback. But before you do that, the one thing I found successful is setting up a 15-minute daily stand-up. Recruit or engineering style, like, coming down onto what they do best, setting up a 15-minute session a day where you can just talk through all the things you need from them and know that, the next 24 hours you can do that again. If that doesn't work, then, to what Nathan said, go to their manager.
I mean, I hate saying, go to a skip level and tell on somebody, but sometimes you need it. And like, look, I've had hiring managers that have reported to me where they were not responsive enough. And honestly, I would want to know if they're not being responsive for a role that we are trying to hire for. Like mostly, I'll give you a great example. There was one hiring manager I had who they were just getting into management for the first time, and they were sort of overwhelmed. They were completely overwhelmed with all the things they had to do and all their new responsibilities. And honestly, they wanted to portray the idea that they could handle absolutely everything. And they didn't want to have to ask for help. And all they needed to say was like, hey, Nathan, can you help me with this stage of the interview process, or can I lean on my colleagues? And they were sort of ashamed to even ask for help. So like some cases, it can be that too. Someone can just be overwhelmed and need help and not know how to, ask for help. And sometimes they need a nudge. for better or worse. All right, I think we are at time. We've got a couple of other questions, but I think we will leave those. I will, since there's one more CoderPad question, I'll answer it really, really quickly. So CoderPad has real-time interview assessments that you can do live, take home in exactly the same functionality, and also screening assessments. So all of those things. And so I answered that one, Sherry. Hopefully that helps a little bit. All right, so since we're at time, I just want to thank all of our panelists for taking, an hour out of their time to, talk and discuss all of this live. It's, very, very important topic. I feel really passionately about it, and all of your insights were wonderful today. So I want to thank everybody for Sarah, Vanessa, Gerardo, for taking the time out of your day to discuss that with us, and really appreciate that. Hopefully everyone enjoyed. Like I said at the top, recording will be available for every registrant. So if you want to replay any of this, it will be absolutely available to you once we end the session. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate all the questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but there were a lot of good questions and not enough time in the world. So thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and hope you enjoyed. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.